Townland of Marlhill lies to the west of New Inn. Set in the heart of the Golden Vale, it's rich farming area. The Ireland of the 1930s moved at a slower pace and people knew their places. It was a traditional, hard-working community, about to be riven by the events unfolding on the morning of Thursday, the 21st of November, 1940. Harry Gleeson returned from New Inn to the Caesar farm with the local guards. The Caesars had taken on Harry, their nephew, as their farm manager many years earlier.
Is she from round here?
I never went near her. I don't know who she is.
You have no idea at all?
No.
You say you saw a dog?
Yeah, black sheepdog.
They had a hired help, Tommy Reid, who lived in the house, as did Harry, who now led the Gardaí to the field that he often ploughed.
It's through here. Down there in the corner.
God, it looks like Moll McCarthy.
Looks like Moll's foxy head, all right.
In spite of the severe damage done to her face, Sergeant Daly and Garda Ruth instantly recognised the body as that of Moll McCarthy.
Will you take the bloody dog, Harry?
What'll I do with him?
Bring her back to the house. And bring a sheet to cover her with.
Moll was a neighbour of Gleeson's who lived just 3 fields away. The guards examined the ground around the body, finding spent cartridges.
Sergeant. Just been recently fired.
It's an interesting twist.
So ended the life of Moll McCarthy. Her body was to lie in the field for a further day while the police awaited the forensic experts from Dublin. She'd received 2 shotgun blasts, one severing the spinal cord and a second at close range, destroying her face. Moll McCarthy was well known in the local community. She lived with her 6 children in a cottage next to the Caesar farm. Moll supported her large family on a state allowance of 6 shillings and 2 bottles of milk a week. But what was unusual about Moll was that she was unmarried and that each one of her children were by different local men.
She went with one man at a time and only one man. And when, after the child was born and reared and got to the age of reason, so to speak, she told the child who his or her father was. She was quite open about it.
So how long is it since you've been here?
30-odd years since I arrived back here to this house, or where the house was.
Mickey McCarthy is the oldest surviving member of Moll's family. As a child, he was a key witness to the events of 1940-41 and has fond memories of his mother.
You knew old Caesar wouldn't give us some spuds. Sure, that man's too mean altogether.
Mary, will you give us the milk?
Paddy, on your way home tomorrow, would you call into Rockwell, see if they've anything for us?
And I'd check the snares in the morning. Maybe there'd be some rabbits.
She brought up us very well. I taught the world of her, she taught the world of us.
You're a great boy.
She looked after us in every way she could. Any time she ever went out, she always came back and looked after us. She stood up for us in every way, and we stood up for her.
Moll certainly stood up for her family. A few years back, when one of the boys had been bullied at school, she decided on a quick remedy.
I want a word with you. My Paddy's after coming home crying, after being called a bastard, and a McCarthy bastard. Well, the boy who said that ought to be very careful. No son of mine's going to be insulted. We're as good as the rest of you. And what do you think you're looking at? Sure, you're Paddy's half-brother. So don't be calling your own brother names. Do you understand me? That goes for Maury as well. Be very careful what you say about the McCarthys. Or I'll be back up here again to tell you a thing or two about your fathers that you mightn't want to hear. Come on, Paddy.
The immediate consequence of this scene in the schoolyard was that one of the children was taken away from the school. It showed how independent Moll was. She was going to continue to flout convention. She was going to continue in her, shall we say, bohemian lifestyle.
This then was the mother gone from them. A full-scale murder inquiry was now underway. Inspector O'Reilly from Thurles and Superintendent Mahoney from Care came to supervise the investigation. As the man who found the body, Harry Gleeson gave a statement.
I often fired a shot out of my uncle's gun to protect the crops, but I did not shoot any since last August. I've heard the statement read over to me, and it is true and correct.
He told of finding Moll's body and outlined for Inspector O'Reilly his routine in the days before his gruesome discovery. Harry also told of his life in Marlhill.
Here come the women with the tea, lads. We'll take a break.
Right.
Although he had worked on his uncle's farm for 16 years, Harry received no regular wage. But since the Caesars were childless, it was understood that he would inherit the farm. Aged 38, he was not from Marlhill, but was on good terms with his neighbours. Harry enjoyed playing the fiddle. He had a keen interest in greyhounds and played hurling on the local team. Although he was well sought after as a dancing partner, he remained a bachelor. Tommy Reid lived with Harry Gleeson on the Caesar farm. Reid worked as a labourer when a young man, spending most of his time milking cows and doing odd jobs. Today, he remembers Harry Gleeson well.
If you wanted to pick a nice fella, you couldn't pick nicer. Never, interfere with anyone. A lovely fella to have a chat with. Didn't drink. Always playing the fiddle.
Gleeson told police of the days before he found Moll's body on Thursday morning. He'd been ploughing the stubble field and in the evenings exercised his greyhounds, which took him around the whole farm. On the Wednesday evening, he'd walked the greyhounds and hadn't seen anyone or anything unusual. Returning to the yard just before 6, he'd fed the dogs. He told them of an ordinary evening in the farmhouse.
Will it ever let up, John?
No, I don't think so. Signs are in the hedges and on the mountain. I've never seen the signs so bad.
Aye, it's a long time since I
A
seen
labourer from a nearby farm had called in for a chat.
How are the hounds, Harry?
Could be better.
Will you be running them at the weekend?
Kilcheelan. Hope to do well.
After supper, Harry would often visit a neighbouring house for a game of cards or a chat. But on Wednesday evening, he'd stayed in.
Hang on up. I don't mind me. It is early yet.
Good night, Harry.
Night, Harry. Night.
You have a cup of tea, Harry, before you go up?
Nah, I've had enough tea for one day.
He retired to bed at 8:30. The next morning, he'd discovered the body, told the Caesars, and had come directly to the police station.
That's fine, Harry. Thanks for coming in. You can go now.
Before he left the station, Harry asked a question which struck the guards as unusual.
Were you able to fix the time of the murder yet?
No, not yet, Harry.
Garda activity intensified in the days after the murder.
I'll bring it back, Paddy, when the tests are finished.
Well aware that a number of men in the area might have reason to be glad that Moll was dead, Gardaí interviewed some of the reputed fathers of her children. Shotguns were impounded for examination.
Thank you, Mr. Caesar.
The single-barrel shotgun kept on Caesar's farm was also taken away for tests.
You wouldn't know what direction she came from?
On Saturday, Gardaí convened a full conference to review what they knew. Of the men questioned, many had been eliminated by accounting for their movements of Wednesday night and having witnesses to say where they were.
Have you picked up all the shotguns?
The legally held ones anyway.
Tell me,
The senior officers relied on the local knowledge of Sergeant Daly and Garda Ruth to brief them.
Right then, Moll, I'll be off back to the station.
Right, Sergeant.
Both men knew Moll well. Among her many jobs, she'd worked as a cleaning lady in the Garda station. Garda Ruth had served a summons on her the previous week for the non-attendance at school of one of her boys. And Sergeant Daly, although only 5 months in the area, was known to call on her.
They would have had practically nothing to do with her, even if she went shopping or to mass, as she did for many years, until we think herself and Father O'Malley fell out. There would have been practically no contact between her and the local community, so they would have, I suppose it's fair to say, they would have treated her with contempt.
Oh, she had a few enemies. There was some people didn't talk to her. They spoke to us, like, you know, to the kids.
When I knew that lass she was, I'd keep, you know, you can sit on the road if you're seen talking to them like those people, you're as bad as yourself.
Certainly there had been many attempts to bring Moll into the fold. The parish priest, under pressure from locals, had tried to get her to mend her ways. But when Moll had another child by a married man, he gave up, although local Legion of Mary member Miss Cooney supported her. In 1936, the Guards attempted, by court order, to have her children taken into care, on the grounds that she was not looking after them properly.
Yeah, but George says I'm a good and fit mother.
The district justice, however, decided that she was a good mother and refused the application. A previous attempt to break up her family nearly succeeded. In 1926, soon after the birth of her second child, and while her mother was living with them, there was an attempt to burn her out. The McCarthys were lucky to escape with their lives. Clearly, as far back as that, some people wanted rid of Moll. She defied them, stayed on, and got compensation to re-roof the house. But now, 14 years on, someone had succeeded where the arson attack had failed. 2 days after examining the scene, the police were pursuing definite leads. Preliminary tests on the guns and the cartridges found near the body had isolated the Caesar shotgun in particular. The officers now decided to look closer at the occupants of the Caesar farm because of what the McCarthy children had told Garda Ruth.
Well, there is one thing. One of the McCarthy children, Mickey, was down the fields that morning. He thinks he saw something.
In a coordinated move the following Monday, the guards took the Caesars to the station. They were to remain there all day. At the same time, Tommy Reid was taken into the police station on his way home from the creamery in New Inn.
I know nothing about this matter.
They're wanted in, Tom.
Yeah, take up the two turns and I'll be back down.
No, they're wanted in. That's all I know.
You won't release the cattle.
Guard, take this animal.
He was detained for questioning for 13 hours. Meanwhile, Superintendent Mahoney led more officers down to the farm. Harry Gleeson was now on his own, and they'd many questions to put to him. The guards brought a change of clothes. Those Harry wore were taken away for examination. The guards searched the Caesar farm.
I'm charging you, Harry Gleeson, that on or between 5 p.m. the 20th...
Cautioned before being questioned, Harry was asked if there was a sack belonging to the McCarthys on the Caesar farm. He said no. Over 13 hours, he was asked how he got on with the McCarthy children and the kind of contacts he had with Moll. Harry told the officers that he'd occasionally given Moll potatoes in a sack without telling his uncle. The last time he'd done so was over 2 years before, when he'd thrown a butt of spuds over a hedge for Moll to collect in the morning.
There's a stain on your shirt. Tell me about that.
What?
As in his previous statement, he told of working the ploughed field in the days prior to the finding of the body.
Paddy, you're only chasing up the field.
Gleeson had little to do with the McCarthys, he said. He would often see them as their goats occasionally strayed onto his uncle's land. He knew them, of course. Why wouldn't he, living and working right next to them?
Just getting the goats out, Harry.
He was aware of Moll's history, and he knew of the fathers of her children. Mr. Caesar allowed Moll to draw water from the farm pump, and Harry often met her there. But he hadn't seen her at the pump all that week, and hadn't spoken to her for a month.
Right, lads, that's plenty. Should go on home with us.
Harry described again what he'd seen early on the Thursday morning. He said he had not crossed the ditch into the ploughed field. Asked why he didn't recognise Moll McCarthy, he said the dog had been in the way. Asked would he not have recognised Moll's dog, Harry said he'd never seen it before.
Did you come this far?
No, it was back a bit.
Well, show me.
The detectives took Harry down to the ditch and asked him to show how far he'd come the Thursday morning he'd found Moll. They were puzzled as to why Harry didn't recognise her, especially in view of what Mickey McCarthy had told them had happened on the Tuesday.
Well, she said she was going out, and I went down along the field with her, on which you knew today where I showed you, to the middle of the field. And she wouldn't let me go any farther because I had to go to Condon's for some milk. And that was it. That was the last I saw of her.
And where did you think she'd gone?
I knew where she was going. She went to meet Harry Gleeson. She told me.
Harry Gleeson?
Yeah.
And why did she go to meet Harry Gleeson?
Oh, I don't know. I think she was getting potatoes off him or something.
When Moll had failed to return on the Wednesday evening, the McCarthy children became very worried and spent hours looking for her.
Go on, Mickey, go to bed. Go on, you have to be up for school in the morning.
Please, Paddy, let me come with you.
Go in. I'll bring Mammy back.
Paddy went back out and searched for Moll into the early hours of Thursday morning. It wasn't like their mother to stay out long, and certainly not overnight. Paddy went up to the ploughed field. Unknown to him then, he'd looked in the very place where Moll's body was found the next morning. But he'd seen no sign of her, so where had she been then? It was a question never answered. Early the next morning, Mickey got up to resume the search for Moll. What he told the guards contradicted Gleeson's statement. Mickey said that he saw Gleeson just before 8 a.m., not only at the gap, but jump into the ploughed field where Moll's body was later found. Could Harry have missed seeing the body? If he had, why did it take him until 9:30 to report finding it over an hour and a half later? Mickey's evidence gave the guards further reason to be suspicious of Gleeson. They conducted a series of exercises.
Superintendent?
Yes?
The McCarthy boys said that Moll had given Gleeson an empty sack for potatoes, which Harry was to give her on the Wednesday. Mickey was brought to the Caesar farm and identified the sack.
Is that the bag? Sure?
This is the bag, it is.
Harry had earlier denied having the sack. Why had he lied? The guards conducted another exercise which was to prove crucial in the prosecution case. The next day they brought Gleeson down to Moll's cottage. It was time, they felt, to confront Harry with the McCarthy boys.
What about the bag my mother gave you on Tuesday?
I got no bag from your mother on Tuesday.
You did!
Tuesday evening? What time?
Didn't you tell me she gave you back some time on Tuesday?
She told you. I wasn't speaking to your mother high nor dry on Tuesday.
You were! She gave you a bag and don't be telling lies! You were to give her potatoes in it, little dugout on Wednesday night.
I wasn't speaking to your mother on Tuesday. I saw her about 1:30, spancing goats out in the field.
She did give you the bag. You were to give him to her while the says is wearing Cathal. And you were the father of the last child.
Who can prove that?
You are the father of the last child. My ma told me.
People could be telling you lies. Your mother could be telling you things, and it could be other people.
My mother said you were the father of the last child. You can't deny it.
She could tell you many a thing.
That Gleeson was the father of Moll's last child was a shocking and damning allegation.
Your mother was a liar. God rest her soul.
Taken with their other suspicions, it gave the guards grounds for arrest.
Come along, Harry.
Was there a relationship between Harry Gleeson and your mother?
There were, yes.
What do you think that relationship was?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, to be honest, like, you know, but he did father a child, so.
He fathered a child?
Yeah, and the child died.
And you were aware of this?
Yes, yeah.
How did you know that?
She told me. My mother told me.
Hey, you couldn't be anything. Harry, the last child. What did Moll say about the last child? That she carried, nobody never knew any, who wanted her. She'd carry that to the grave with her.
The trial of the state versus Harry Gleeson opened here at the Central Criminal Court, Green Street, Dublin, on February the 17th, 1941, almost 3 months after Moll McCarthy had been murdered. The court was to hear 48 witnesses. The prosecution case was that Harry Gleeson had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to murder Moll. The motive, he wanted to get rid of Moll because she'd threatened to bring him to law over a child which he'd fathered. The means, he used his uncle's shotgun, and the opportunity, he had killed Moll sometime on Wednesday evening when shots had been heard locally around 6 p.m, or if not then, in the early hours of Thursday morning. The trial heard from 3 of the McCarthy children, Mary the eldest, Paddy and Mickey.
Will you be all right, Mammy?
Yeah. I'll be grand. Shall I be home later?
All 3 told of Moll's relationship with Harry Gleeson, of how Moll and Harry often met at the pump. Sometimes she would be away with Gleeson a good while, other times not. This had often happened, Mickey told the court.
Grab a pole for bigger up.
And Mickey also told of a row between Moll and Harry over the goats.
Jesus Christ, Moll, how many times have I told you to keep those feckin' goats off this land? You'll have me in trouble.
It's not Paddy's fault, sure. He can't be watching the goats the whole time.
He's got eyes in his head, hasn't he? What kind of a fool is he?
Don't call him a fool, Harry. He's only doing his best.
If I see those goats on this land again, I'll...
Don't you dare threaten me, Harry Gleeson. Or I'll have you up to the law to pay for the baby.
Moll's threats at the prosecution provoked Gleeson to decide to end Moll's life. According to the children, they'd afterwards made up the row. On Tuesday, Moll had given Harry an empty sack. He was to fill it up with potatoes and give them to her on the Wednesday evening. But, said the prosecution, Harry, terrified that his uncle would disinherit him if Moll sued over the child, had another plan in mind for that fateful Wednesday night. Gleeson had proved to be a liar on a number of counts, said the prosecution. He had lied about his relationship with Moll, which was an immoral one, going back for some time, as a result of which she became pregnant. She had threatened him with exposure, and so he had to shut her up. That, in essence, was the prosecution case. about to be tested by Gleeson's defence team, which included Sean McBride, then a junior counsel. The defence claimed that there was no evidence that Harry had met Moll on the Wednesday evening and had killed her. In any event, they suggested, the time the murder took place was not established. Doctors couldn't agree on the time of death. There was very little blood in the vicinity of the body, and the position of the feet, hands and clothes suggested she'd been carried to this spot. If Moll was shot on Wednesday evening, as the prosecution claimed, where had she spent the Wednesday night, dead or alive? McBride asked. The defence claimed that there were some peculiarities in police behaviour. The trial heard how Tommy Reid had been detained for 13 hours in the Garda barracks. Reid maintained that the guards wanted him to make a statement that Harry Gleeson had been out all night on Wednesday, and that Harry had returned to the house on the Thursday morning when Reid was getting up.
They wanted me to say Harry Gleeson was the partner of the last child. Now, for Oprah now, they didn't know what to make this case a morning case or a night case.
Thank you, Mr. Caesar.
McBride also instanced the shotgun taken from the Caesar farm. The ballistics expert found 14 points of similarity between the shotgun's firing pin and marks on a cartridge found near the body. In cross-examination, he admitted that there were points of dissimilarity between the firing pin and the cartridge.
A lot of similarities.
Had the police subjected all the guns that they'd taken in to the same series of tests? McBride asked. The answer was no.
You are the father of the last child, too!
Who can prove that? You are the father of the last child. My ma told me.
People could be telling you lies.
The defence claimed that there was no proof that Harry had had a sexual relationship with Moll. McBride suggested that the scene between the McCarthy boys and Gleeson had been engineered by the guards and had influenced the jury's view of his client. Then there was the evidence about the blood found on Gleeson's clothes. McBride maintained that the blood came innocently from the dog which Harry had lifted on Sergeant Daly's instructions. In spite of the questions raised by the defence, the judge's summing up was unsympathetic to Harry Gleeson. The accused was evasive, he implied. As to whom the jury should believe in the evidence of Moll's sons as against Gleeson's denial, that was a matter for them to weigh. The jury was out for more than 2 hours. When they returned, it was with a verdict of guilty. Harry Gleeson was sentenced to death by hanging. But the jury made a strong recommendation for mercy, which meant that the government of the day could, if it wished, commute that to life imprisonment. The Marlhill area was rife with rumours after the trial had finished. It was said that certain local men had killed Moll. The parish priest tried to quell the gossip. Another rumour centred on an IRA cell active in the area, one of whom was known to be involved with Moll. It was well known locally that Sergeant Daly had been drafted in to monitor these IRA activities. In fact, Daly admitted that he'd visited Moll on the afternoon she was last seen alive. He wasn't asked why, and so the question of his involvement with her never went further. Tommy Reid now claims he heard shots around 6 on Wednesday evening.
Whoever fired those shots must have cat's eyes.
Were those the shots that killed Moll, as the prosecution at first maintained? If so, Harry had an alibi.
I'm not in for the tea.
I'll follow you in. I'll just finish up this lot.
But the 2 shots I heard were of a double-barrel gun at 6 o'clock. When Harry was in the yard at me, them were the 2 shots that busted the side of her face. Whether she was strangled somewhere else and brought up there, because there was much blood, there'd been much blood on the top of my finger, it was got on her.
Either the Molly McCarthy was killed on the Wednesday evening or she was killed on the Thursday morning. Now the state, as we know, based their case on the Wednesday evening killing. I accept Tommy Reid's alibi for Harry Gleeson for an evening shooting. As regards the morning, we have this other story of the tailor who was walking up the main Dublin to Cork Road when he heard shots about the time that the morning theory would have held water. And he is convinced that the gun he heard was a double-barrel shotgun. Well, we know it wasn't a double-barrel shotgun that Caesar owned.
However, Harry had gone to bed early on the Wednesday evening.
I don't mind me, it's early yet. Night, Harry.
Good night, Harry.
Night.
Perhaps he could have committed the murder during the night or early the next morning.
There was practically no blood at the spot where she was found. So if Harry Gleeson did it on the morning, he had to kill her elsewhere. Now, that would have involved getting blood all over his clothes, on his shoes, on his hands, perhaps on his shirt. He would have had to have gone in home and clean all that off. And I don't believe he could have done it.
Even more puzzling is a recent revelation about Moll's 19-year-old daughter, Mary McCarthy Jr. Nurse Anne Martin cared for Moll's daughter in her old age.
I started work in the Royal Hospital in Donnybrook in early 1988 and was working a lot of the time on Mary McCarthy's ward, on the ward she was sleeping on. And one night she was very upset and I went down to comfort her, and she told me that she had saw her own mother shot on the kitchen floor and followed it up with something like, and an innocent man died. And I can't remember this exact second words because I got quite a fright with the first ones. And I didn't probe her anymore. I just tried to comfort her and get her back to sleep.
Whoever ended Moll's life did it in a brutal way, breaking up the McCarthy family. Moll's 6 children were put into various convents and institutions, never to return home. In spite of many attempts, Sean McBride couldn't get anyone from Tipperary to come forward and say in court what was being whispered locally. However, he did succeed in having Harry's execution deferred while the High Court heard an appeal. It failed. The government set another date for the execution. A widespread campaign was generated in Tipperary to save Harry Gleeson, amassing a petition of 7,000 signatures. Such was the campaign that the then Taoiseach, Eamon de Valera, in an unusual move, sought the views of the trial judge and Superintendent Mahoney of Care, all to no avail. McBride received formal notification that his client was to be executed on the 23rd of April 1941. He paid his last visit to Mountjoy Jail the day before Harry Gleeson was to be executed.
The last thing I want to say is that tomorrow I'll pray that whoever did it will be discovered and the whole thing will be like an open book. I rely on you then to clear my name. I've no confession to make. Only I didn't do it.
I say he's still guilty, and will be to the day I die.
And what about hanging? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think he got what he deserved.
He's as innocent as our Lord. But I hope I'll live to see the day that people that done it come forward and get themselves up and let that man rest in peace.
What started out with the loss of Moll McCarthy's life in brutal circumstances ended with the taking of another, that of Harry Gleeson. Both Moll and Harry were in their own way outsiders in this close-knit farming community, which went on with life afterwards as if nothing had happened. But mention of the case to this very day causes rancour and division in this area of South Tipperary. Harry Gleeson was buried in the grounds of Mountjoy Jail. That following summer, local farmers helped the Caesars with the thrashing. Moll McCarthy was buried in an unmarked grave. Questions remain as to who murdered her. Was it a group of local people offended once too often by her unconventional lifestyle? Was the IRA involved? Or did Harry Gleeson kill Moll after all?
The summer of 1948 sets the scene for next week's murder story. A desperate affair can be seen at the same time, 10 past 10.